Hey everyone, on today's stimulus update, we're talking all about this HEROES Act. We're going to give you the brief overview, and then we're also going to be talking about when this is likely going to be discussed in the Senate, because it's only passed in the House at this point. We still have to get through the Senate and the President. Check it out. Hey everyone, welcome back to another stimulus update. I'm Logan.
I'm Adine.
And Adine and I are talking today about the largest act or largest stimulus bill that's ever been pushed through Congress. At this point, it's just in the House, but on Friday, they approved a $3 trillion package called the HEROES Act. So, Adine, give us the overview of this, because we talked about this a couple days ago, that this was going through the House, but give us just a basic overview of what this entails.
Yeah, so as you just mentioned, biggest stimulus package ever to pass at least one chamber of Congress, which was the House of Representatives. And at $3 trillion, the question becomes, where does this money go? Ultimately, the question is going to be also, where does the money come from? So we have clarity on where the money goes. A third of it, as we had previously mentioned, is allocated towards states and helping states shore up their finances, as they have been severely impacted by losing revenues due to sales tax, due to meals tax, and various other taxes that they usually collect when the economy is completely open and everybody's going about their business. So that's a third's already allocated. The other $2 trillion, the majority of it is going to come in the form of a second round of what have been called economic impact payments. So these are the $1,200 stimulus checks that most of us have received. Some of us are unfortunately still waiting for them. If you're getting a paper check, they finally started mailing those last week. So those should be arriving in people's mailboxes here, hopefully this upcoming week and thereafter. So that's a majority of the rest of the $2 trillion. And then we can talk about a couple other provisions.
So one of the big things that is big about this package, that's, first off, it's really being pushed by the Democrats in the House. The Senate and the President have pretty much said, don't bother wondering if this is going to get through us or not, because they've already said it's not. It's quote unquote dead on arrival. So we'll talk about, I guess the realistic aspect of it, but the Senate has also said we're not really going to look into this until after the Memorial Day recess, which at this point we've still got more than a week until the Senate's back in and everything. So they are pretty much effectively just going to ride this thing out and just talk about it back and forth, but not actually do anything until after that recess, which is on the 25th of May. So we still have a good amount of time for that. But some of the interesting things about this bill is that we have seen with all these other different stimulus packages that we've talked about on this channel that have been brought forward, most of them talk about monthly checks, monthly stimulus checks or direct deposits coming to you, but this one doesn't. So this one, Adine, what is it? It's $1,200, one-time thing, just like the first act.
I'm going to touch base on the timing first here. So I think in our last video we talked about this and what's the likelihood of it passing and the resistance by the Senate and Republicans. And so the timing kind of coincides with phase 2 reopenings in most states. So we had phase 1 in a lot of states happen at the beginning of the month. And we're getting some data. We're going to get more data. And what was really surprising about the House passing it is that they're in recess as well. And so I think this is just posturing by the Senate to buy time, saying, okay, well, we want to wait until we come back after the Memorial Day break, which, again, gives us more time to assess the situation, figure out, again, also posturing. And how are we going to negotiate what we do want to pass, what we don't want to pass? So it seems like at some point there is good likelihood of something getting passed. It's just a question of in what form. So now to address the second question, which was how's this different from the first stimulus bill? So in round one, what it was $1,200 for anybody who has to file their tax returns, $2,400 if you're married filing jointly, and if you had a dependent, you got $500 per dependent age 16 or younger. So now with this one, it's supposed to be the $1,200 for each adult plus $1,200 per dependent. I haven't seen if there is an age cutoff for this one or if it's anybody in your household. And it's up to 5 people in your household. So 5 times $1,200 is $6,000.
Now, it's still, we talked about some of the other acts that have been put forward where, $2,000 a month until this thing is over. And then a year after that thing's over, continuing the stimulus checks. But this is still just a one-time check. Now, the other interesting thing is that the House, it wasn't like they passed it unanimously. They barely passed it, right? There's some reports that say they won 218 to 189 votes, others that say 208 to 199. Either way, it wasn't like this was a sweeping pass. So that kind of shows you the House, who is run majority or by the Democrats, are not even like they're all in on this stuff. And a lot of the more moderate Democrats are still kind of teetering on this because, again, 2020, big year for everybody. So the Senate and the president have already said, we're not doing this. And I know with what you said coincides with the reopening. We're both in North Carolina. This Friday begins, at this point, phase 2, right? We're halfway through phase 1. Phase 2 starts, and a lot of this stuff is really going to be dependent on what is really happening, because then at that point they can determine, is this enough? Which $3 trillion is, the first one was more than $2 trillion. This one is effectively another 40-50% more than that first one. So it's a massive thing, and I think they're just hesitant to jump on the deliberating before they see what's really going on across the U.S.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the key here as we're getting that data of what's happening across the country and across the world, because we are now finally seeing big impacts to the overall economy. Like we reported on retail sales numbers being down the most year over year ever.
16%, crazy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And so you're going to see more pressure on Congress on both sides to, one, reopen the economy, but two, also to pass a second stimulus package. And so I think, again, the timing piece is always the critical piece. If they just start throwing out money and passing legislation, again, being such a critical year with elections, you're seeing so much posturing around that is clouding the actions of our representatives. And ultimately, I think once they get back into Congress, you're going to see more negotiation happening. One, again, on one extreme is this $3 trillion package, $1,200 per person in a household up to $6,000, $1 trillion towards states. And so you're going to start getting both sides to actually sit down and talk about what do they really want out of this, and in what respect can we come to a middle ground, because there's some other things that the Republicans want that they haven't fully brought forward, and you'll see, this is an 1,800-page bill. You're going to see some adjustments to it, and you're going to see some surprises get buried in this bill if it does ultimately get passed, to make both sides happy.
Yeah, and one of the other things was canceling effectively, $10,000 in student loans to those that have been affected by everything going on. So it's not like with some of these other stimulus bills that they're trying to push forward, which is just, like the Heroes. There was also like a Heroes Act, like Part 1, that was separate, that would just give $25,000 to actual frontline workers and healthcare workers and stuff, as a big raise to their salary. This is separate, where this actually is a very all-encompassing, very similar to what CARES Act 1 was, which wasn't just focusing on one industry or one segment of people. This is really across the board. And with 1,800 pages, which is more than CARES Act 1 was, they're going to take their time, going through it all. So a lot of stuff here. It's a massive bill, and at $1 trillion of it, like Adine said, $1 trillion of it is just going to directly go to the smaller governments just to help them out. Because, I mean, Adine, with everything going on in these states, they're not getting their tax money, right? All these taxes are being put off, sales tax, all that stuff. I mean, what are some of the biggest industries that states generally rely on for this money that they're not getting now?
Well, I mean, the two biggest industries are going to be retail and restaurants, right? And those are the two that have been shut down the longest. We just mentioned about retail sales being down 16% year over year, and restaurants in just about every state had at least 3 to 4 weeks of mandatory closures where it was takeout only. And I work with a few restaurants, and their sales, or even though they're doing takeouts, their sales are just like catastrophically low. There's no way to be anywhere close to normal with just takeouts. So all that revenue, especially cities, charge a meals tax on top of a regular sales tax, and so that's affecting the local governments. And so you have this basically two factors coming together, and our economy is 70% consumption, meaning 70% of our economy is retail and restaurants. And so now when you have that declining so much, obviously taxes that our governments are collecting go way down, and that means they're impacted and they're not able to provide the services that we're looking for. Plus, governments have been looked to provide some of these critical programs. One, unemployment. Two, figuring out in terms of how to provide gear for our frontline workers, and working with the hospitals and medical facilities. And they just don't have, one, they don't have the resources, and two, again, human capital, people being in the office to make those connections with industry to get supplies where they need to go.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff with this. So just kind of recap this. We had a huge, we had a lengthy video where we talked all aspects of the HEROES Act, so make sure you guys check that one out if you want to learn more in layman's terms what specifically is part of it. But on top of that, the Senate has come forward and pretty much said, we're not doing anything with this until after the Memorial Day recess. And it's not just because they want to hang out until recess. They're really trying to see what's going on across the country. In the meantime, to see with all of these multi-phase reopenings happening state by state. So everyone, thank you very much for joining Adine and I today. As always, if you want to make sure that you stay up to date on all this stuff and understand what is truly going on in layman's terms, hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.